Welcome to This Week in Missouri Politics from the happiest place in the Missouri, the Midway here at the Missouri State Fair. We are here to bring you one of the most special shows we've ever done. We are joined by 8 people who worked for former Senator Kit Bond and his legacy and all the things we've discussed on the show really every week. We're gonna get to hear some of the story from the folks that were there with him. Starting with Derek Coates. Thank you so much for joining us. What did you do with Senator Bond?
Well, thank you, Scott. It's always an opportunity to talk about Senator Bond and all the things he did for the state. Always welcome that. I started with Kit as an intern in his Kansas City office. And then I went on to work with him in the Jeff City office, working my way up from staff assistant to district office director.
Sarah Graff. What all did you do with Senator Bond?
My name's Sarah Graff. I started in 2003 with Senator Kit Bond on his reelection campaign, and then worked the last term both in D.C. and in the state, and ended up being his district office director in mid-Missouri.
Jake Black.
Yeah.
Tell me what you ended up doing with Senator Bond.
Yeah, I did a lot of things for Senator Bond. Started out on the official side in Jeff City as a staff assistant as well. Derek and I were in the front office same time together, 2001, I believe it was, and then spent a lot more time on the political side where he'd send us out for races all across the state and the country to help his friends get elected and get in office.
Mike DuBois, tell us what you did with Senator Bond.
Yeah, started with Senator Bond, Kit, as we all affectionately called him, in Washington in 2001. Worked my way up handling his military and intelligence work there. So
You are right. Like I knew him when I became mayor of Poplar Bluff. And I'm 22 and he's the United States Senator. And he really I was just raised, you call the person Mr. Senator, whatever. And I could tell, actually, some people say, oh, don't call me that, but they kind of want you to. I could tell you were kind of putting him out when you didn't call him Kit, right?
that's right. It took me about 10 years of the 10 years I worked for him to call him finally Kit.
Derek, when I think of Kit Bond, I think of the amazing things he did for this state. I'm sure he voted on a lot of important stuff, but the things that last are the things. I don't think you can get in this state and drive 30 miles any direction and not see a road he built, a bridge he built, water pipe he helped lay, a sewer he helped put in, some part of a community block grant that he helped bring in. Give me some examples of stuff you worked on with him and you got to see him bring to fruition for the state of Missouri.
Certainly. One of the most fond projects I have is the Jeff City Courthouse. It's the federal courthouse in Jefferson City. We started work on that from conception, the idea that they needed a new federal courthouse. The current federal courthouse at that time was too small. You had inmates sharing elevators with judges, which is not a good thing. So we started off with site selection, finding different sites to view, working with federal judges, and then Kit ultimately went to work and secured the money to construct that federal courthouse, which was, I think, built in 2011. So
it is beautiful. It is one of those things. Some folks come to Jeff City, they don't ever take the time to drive down by the river and see it.
Right.
But it is gorgeous.
It is, and having it right there at the old prison site, just a lot of.
And it's appropriately named.
Right.
The Kit Bond Courthouse,
Yep.
right?
Yep. Thanks to Roy Blunt. Yes.
A lot of things. Thanks for, but we'll get to that later. Sarah, tell me a project that you got to see Kit Bond work on and bring to fruition for the state.
So the most influential project I think I've worked on is the East Locust Creek Reservoir project up in Milan, Missouri, in Sullivan County. It's now called the Roy Blunt Reservoir, but it's a 2,200 acre reservoir that serves drinking water to 10 counties. And Kit was really the impetus of this project back when he was governor. It was something that they talked about needing in the 1980s. And it was one of those things that just didn't get done until he took the reins of it, and then Kit and Roy took it on from after he did. And so it's being built right now.
What an amazing transfer from Kit Bond. I mean, the shoes he left to fill. I mean this with all the respect in the world to Senator Bond, but I actually think Roy Blunt was a worthy successor to Kit Bond.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know how you give somebody a bigger compliment.
That's absolutely right.
Probably
And Derek and I, it was a great compliment for Derek and I to make the transition with him and come onto Roy's staff afterward.
I bet there was a lot of things that started off as projects that nobody was championing, that Kit Bond started championing, that Roy Blunt actually got to go cut a ribbon at. I bet those are a ton of things around the state.
Yeah. It was fun as a staff to see that.
Yeah. Jake, tell me something you worked on with the senator that you think back on when again, there's just so many things. I didn't even know about this reservoir.
Yeah.
There's so many things like that. Tell me a project you guys worked on you brought proud of.
Yeah, I think it worked around a lot of things, but growing up as a kid in a super small rural community, I remember a big thing that Kit really championed was parents as teachers.
Yeah.
And getting that off the ground on how we can better educate from the ground floor up the kids. I obviously wasn't a part of that, but I saw the legacy firsthand as I grew up. And I think that was one thing that was great about Kit is he wasn't focused in one certain area. It was, how do we help the state? And it's not, is it just inner city, Kansas City or St. Louis or outstate? It was the whole state as one. And that's how we viewed it. Everything was equal as it went across. I remember on the campaign side, a big part of his world was just making sure that we had good people in place to help run the state, run the counties, run the cities. And that's what made a strong, good state, right? That was a big part of his philosophy, is getting the right people. And I think you look around a lot of politicians today that are in place, we heard that through his services. You know, Kit put them in there. Kit appointed them. Kit encouraged them to run. And I think that's a long-standing part of his legacy that'll carry on for a long time.
You know, you think of Kit Bond, you think of not really bipartisan. You think of his ability to work with people. That's once the elections were over.
Right.
The Kit Bond I saw was very much a Republican and wanted to see Republicans win as many seats as they could possibly win. Kit Bond was a major part of putting the money together to flip the majorities.
Oh, huge, huge. And I think it's you know, a great example there with Kit is his relationship with Ike Skelton, who was on the other side of the aisle, and they were friends.
Yep.
I mean, they were really good friends. They got a lot of stuff done. You saw that firsthand. But I remember on the political side, when I was around him later, it was the comment that, you know, when it becomes hard to sit down at a table with somebody from across the aisle to get something done, that's kind of the sign that it's time to get out. Right? Because that part has to be a thing of compromise to actually get good things done, no matter what level of government you are. But he treated everybody equally in this state, Democrat, Republican, small town, big town.
But I remember in '02, when you could sort of sniff that we were going to take that majority.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, there'd be a state rep race in Kirksville or somewhere,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden, Kit Bond would be headlining the fundraiser for some guy to get him the 10 grand he might need. I definitely, he's legendary for the bipartisan nature. But when it came down to it, he wanted to see his team win.
Yeah, sure. 100%.
Mike, tell me something that you worked on with the senator.
Well, my colleagues won't be surprised that I'll talk about his national security prowess and the promotion that he did. And, you know, Missouri plays a real outsized role in our national security. And Kit recognized that from our fighter production lines in St. Louis. I'd refer that as a project that he kept going. Clearly, it wasn't a project he started. But when those fighter lines were under threat and underfunded, Kit came in and basically saved them. We still have them today because of his work. We're still selling F-15s to the U.S. Air Force because of him. And that not only helps that workforce in St. Louis, which is substantially large, it helps a lot of the small manufacturers across the state. So Kit was always, to your point, taking care of the urban interests and rural interests and tying them all together. And I think that's a great legacy for him, and working with Congressman Skelton and others in a bipartisan fashion to get that done.
Yeah, I thought it was very nice to see one of the best speeches at Memorial Service in Jefferson City. I think the best speech was Emanuel Kleber's speech. It was outstanding. He had a 6 a.m. wake-up call with the cigar being smoked in the bedroom at the hotel room next to him on a trip. You could just tell those two had a passion to help each other move forward and to help each other succeed.
Oh, absolutely. And, you know, I was struck by a speech he was given on the floor one time, and it really eschewed his bipartisan nature. But he was coming under attack by a fellow Democrat for being a hawk. And he said, hold on, I'm not a hawk, I'm a dove. But I prefer to be a heavily armed dove. And I thought that was a great way to dismantle what was going to be a bad debate and really make his friend laugh. And those bipartisan folks on the other side of the aisle respected him for that congeniality.
Yeah.
Derek, Rachel Dunn, the Secretary of State's office, put together this great thing will be in the Blue Book about Kit Bond and his pictures, and she had so many of them here at the state fair. Even later in life, he'd come back to the fair, and it wasn't a place he was checking a box. He seemed to love it.
Right. Yep. We planned many of those events. Many of us that worked for him did. His legacy here, though, is pulling all the ag groups together and farmers around the state for a luncheon that has now been taken over, I think, by Senator Hawley. That started off as a small group and grew very quickly to fill that auditorium in the youth center. So, opportunity to come here and visit with everybody from around the state, talk about what's going on. He always enjoyed coming to the fair. We always enjoyed staffing it.
I love seeing those pictures of him at the fair. And what I really appreciated was he never pretended he would just got off a horse. You see here in the fair sometimes somebody runs for office, they see the boots, they look a little shiny, that belt buckle might have the tag on it still. He was himself. I don't think he changed clothes with it to come to the fair. He was himself and he enjoyed it.
That's right. And, you know, he could talk to anyone.
Yep.
Everyone would come up to him and he would talk to everyone and remember their names, even if they haven't, you know, even seen them in a decade. He would still know their names and their kids' names and ask them how they've been. So he was just one of the type of person that everyone liked to be around and liked to talk to.
Tell me a good Kid Bond at the Missouri State Fair story.
You know, I think as we sit here, look across the way at the bud tent, that's what I remember a lot when the bud tent used to be red. And we'd sit there. Kit would always hold court out to the side of the bud tent. There were a lot of discussions, a lot of meetings, a lot of people that would just come up and chat. And that's one thing that I loved about him is he always had a schedule. He was always in a hurry. It was always a lot of our jobs to make sure he was on time, but he would take time for people to sit and visit. And I think some of the best stories that I have and memories that I have are just the way he interacted with anybody and everybody over at the bud tent.
Tell me a story about it, Kit the fair.
Well, you know, I like to say Kit was comfortable in black tie and boots. And, you know, the first time I started working for him, I was also driving him. And the minute he got into the car, he put on an apron. And the apron said Missouri Beef House. I said, what the hell's that apron for? And I looked at it and he said, well, that's when the cigar came out. And so being in the DC side of operations and doing defense policy, I didn't get out to the fair for several years. And then I finally got to see my first trip to the Missouri Beef House with Kit. And that was definitely one of my favorite memories.
I think it's a really fitting thing. We talked about the legacy that Senator Bond handed to Senator Blunt, and that Senator Blunt held up his end of that. I think the greatest compliment I think you could ever give him was he was the worthy successor to Kid Bond. But now that legacy, talk about CFM here at the fair, now that legacy is being continued. You're running now for state senate in Northeast Missouri, correct?
Yep, Scott, I'm running for Senate District 18, which is Senator O'Loughlin's seat right now. And I've learned from the best. I've had the opportunity to work for Kit and Roy and just some of the titans of politics, and I feel lucky that I've been in those positions, and I'm looking forward to working hard for the people again.
Luckily here, replacing Senator O'Loughlin, you can be as direct as you want to be, and nobody's going to think that, you know, they're used to it coming from Northeast Missouri.
Everybody says the same thing. Oh, you have some big shoes to fill.
You have some big shoes to fill, but at least you get to do it as candidly as you want to.
Right.
Thank you all so much for being here and joining us here. We're here on the midway of the Missouri State Fair, the happiest place in Missouri. We're going to come right back with 4 more folks that worked with Senator Bond, including we're getting Silvey out of retirement, bringing him out of the bullpen after this.
For more than a century, the St. Louis Carpenters Union has shaped our communities. Through trusted alliances, we deliver skilled professional craftspeople while our business partners provide the kind of quality jobs that keep our economy humming. It's a blueprint that has worked since 1882. Turning Missouri into a right-to-work state stalls progress, wipes out jobs, and kills momentum. Right to work is wrong for everyone. Let's keep Missouri moving forward. Visit carpdc.org to learn more.
You know, Missouri farmers have been doing what's best for their land for generations. After all, no one knows what it takes to feed and fuel a growing global population better than they do. So why are trial lawyers threatening Missouri farmers' best defense against weeds? Our farmers don't need to be controlled. They need to be supported. Keep glyphosate in our state. Show your support at TakeControlMissouri.com. Paid for by Modern Ag Alliance in support of Missouri farmers.
Missouri's childcare crisis is hurting our children, families, and even our economy. Currently, 78 Missouri counties are designated as childcare deserts, where the number of kids needing childcare exceeds the number of available options. Today, some Missouri families are spending more on childcare than housing, and Missouri's childcare shortage costs our economy $1.35 billion every year. Missouri families and businesses deserve better. Learn more at mochampionofchildren.com.
Some politicians claim cockfighting is a proud tradition, but is it really something to be proud of? Cockfighting isn't just cruel to animals, it's cruel to humans. It's linked to organized criminal activity, illegal gambling, even drug trafficking. Leading law enforcement and Christian groups have spoken out and are urging a stop to the violence. But some politicians want to give cockfighters a pass. Keep cockfighting out of our state.
We have a severe weather alert to report here. The storm is also bringing the threat of damaging winds and large hail.
Here's the thing. When when storms bear down, we step up.
Ready to go?
You bet.
Our teams are always ready to keep your power strong. Ameren.com/poweron.
Welcome back. This week in Missouri Politics from the Midway at the Missouri State Fair. We're going to continue our discussion about the legacy of Senator Kit Bond with Sam Panettiere. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Tell me what you did with Senator Bond.
Okay, so I came in the senator's final Senate term, 2004, as an intern in Kansas City. Had a brief stint in St. Louis working for the senator, and then returned to serve as his district director in the Kansas City office.
You know, I always felt like Senator Bond had a special connection to Kansas City. I know we've talked about how he's done things all over this state, but I always felt like when he talked about Kansas City, there was a little extra excitement in his voice.
Absolutely. He had an affinity for Kansas City, and Kansas City had an affinity for him. He could go in any room, you know, board of executives or just any job site, and everybody knew him, and he brought a real joyful wit with him and a presence, and everybody was happy to be around him, and he made things fun. So Kansas City really appreciated Senator Bond.
Senator Ryan Silvey, welcome back to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So we all know what you've done in the state legislature yourself. I think folks know you worked for Senator Bond. What all did you do for the senator?
Yeah, so in July of 1998, I started at the bottom rung of the Washington, D.C. staff, reading constituent letters, writing some language for him to approve, that sort of thing, and worked there until January of 2001. By that time, was able to get some issues that I worked on, science and technology and space policy being my favorite of those, and then worked in a legislative aid role.
Matt Roney, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Tell me what all you did with Senator Bond.
So I started working for Senator Bond in 1997, answering phones during President Clinton's impeachment in the Jefferson City office.
Fun.
Worked my way, did a lot of driving up to Mexico. I made the trip up to Mexico, to St. Louis. Spent a lot of time on the road with the senator. Went to Kansas City as director and finished up as his political director.
Brad Scott, thank you so much for joining us. We're very honored to have you.
Well, I'm the old guy here, so I started in 1987, kind of like Ryan did, as a legislative correspondent. I did the same thing Ryan did. Came back and did a Bush campaign, showed a knack for working with people, and Kit sent me back to Kansas City to be the district office director, and I served him there for 10 years, and feel very fortunate. I tell people, every door that I walk through, Kit Bond showed me, and I'm still working on a Kit Bond project.
Well, that's what I want to get into. When I think of Senator Bond, I think of somebody that took his position. You know, what an amazing honor to be governor and United States Senator from Missouri. But he actually did things for the people of this state. He actually, I'm sure he voted on a lot of very important things. But to me, the lasting impact is all the things and the money he brought home. Tell me about a couple projects you worked on with the senator.
Where should I start? Well, number one, the senator was so grateful. I'm so grateful to the senator. He believed in putting people in the right position. And one of the things he did for Missouri and for me was to put me at General Services Administration. And they're the landlords for the government, right? So from that vantage point, with Kit in Washington and Matt in Kansas City, we were able to accomplish a whole lot of things. The National Nuclear Security Administration, which is the second largest build-to-suit lease in federal history. The IRS Service Center across from Union Station, the seventh largest build-to-suit lease in the federal government. I could go on and on and on, but I want to leave some project for these guys. The NARA facility out by the airport in St. Louis. Of course, we finished up the Rush Limbaugh Courthouse, the Kit Bond Courthouse. It just goes on and on and on.
He always, to me, was the Babe Ruth of delivering for Missouri.
Well, the thing about Kit is he didn't want to be on the floor. He wanted to be in the committee room. And, he says, well, you can either throw grenades from the sideline or you get out on the field. And he wanted to be out on the field. And he truly, truly loved Missourians.
Matt, tell me about something that you all worked on together.
Just coming off of that, one thing, Kit was always positive. His vision, he was positive about Missourians, and he listened to them. He listened to them, and that's where the ideas came from. All the things Brad just talked about that you're going to hear are all Missouri ideas that we've worked with people in Missouri. I go back to the 4-laning of 63 from Columbia to Kirksville. A lot of people take that for granted now. It was a horrible 2-lane road where moms and dads had their kids, students going from mid-Missouri to Kirksville that were worried about that. Working with Congressman Holsoff and the organization, it was a citizen-driven initiative to fund that to 4 lanes. Joe Purley at the Missouri Primary Care Association. There are community health centers across this state. Their facilities, the care that is in underserved areas in Kansas City, Springfield, St. Louis, Kirksville, all over are funded. Their facilities, the care they receive because of KIT, and being able to actually be responsive to those Missourians and their needs.
Senator Silvey, tell me something you all done together.
Yeah, so when I was there, towards the end of the F-15 run, which of course were built in St. Louis at the Boeing facility, there were a couple of years left on the contract of the U.S. government buying F-15s from Boeing, and there were some senators that wanted to axe the contract and move to the F-35 like immediately. But he knew how devastating that would be to the workforce in St. Louis, so he made the government stick to its commitment and finish out those last few years of buying those F-15s, which gave Boeing the time and opportunity to be able to go get some foreign military sales to make sure that those people stayed employed.
And the people that succeeded them are probably still employed today because of that.
Absolutely.
I mean, even Senator Schmidt.
I mean, if that line would have shut down in '99 or 2000, then all those jobs would have gone away, and it probably wouldn't come back.
It is interesting how you talk about these things build on each other. Eric Schmidt's primary accomplishment of his first 2.5 years in the U.S. Senate has been to bring more of those jobs back, and probably the same line, keeping it going with some new contracts.
Yeah, probably so.
Sammy, tell me something that worked on when you was there.
It's got to be Kit Bond Bridge, of course. It's iconic, but also less.
Which one?
Yeah, right. The one in Kansas City. I mean, it's iconic in itself, but also less sexy projects. You look at some of the early investments he made in infrastructure, the riverfront and Riverside Industrial Park, and now you see more development there that wouldn't have been possible without him. You see Casey Current building on the riverfront. You see them in Riverside, and all these things come to fruition because of Senator Bond listening back in the day and making those things happen. So those were the big ones.
All right, now give me just a good story about Kit.
There's so many. Okay, I'll do one. 2008, presidential election year. Senator McCain had just received the Republican nomination. Senator Bond agreed to serve as chairman of the state campaign. I think it was somewhat known they weren't like fishing buddies, right, in the Senate. They were in the same caucus, but they had some disagreements at times. But of course, he supported him vigorously in the state. He let me go work on the campaign for a while. And, if you can believe it or not, Missouri was a bellwether still kind of then, right?
Back in the day, yeah.
Right. Which warranted, was either 8 or 9 principal visits from McCain or Governor Palin or surrogates. So really a hotbed for activity. And of course, we as a staff, Matt, Dave Hegman, and others, we presented a series of sites and places for Senator McCain to visit to hold these rallies. Whether it was Liberty Memorial, Union Station, Swope, all these things. And Chairman Bond was very happy to approve certain sites in the backdrop of a vigorous debate in the country at the time over what Senator McCain called pork barrel spending. Well, Senator Bond called it strategic investments. And he was very offended by that term. But so every site that we had Senator McCain come and visit, Chairman Bond really approved Senator McCain visiting those spots where he got federal funding for. And every time I can still see his face, kind of a 45-degree angle, smile. We got money for this place, Senator McCain's here. That was my favorite.
I like that. Give me a good story,
Oh,
Senator Bond.
by far my favorite story. When I was a young staffer, 22, 23 years old, one of my responsibilities was to take school groups on tours of the Capitol if they were to come up. He rarely was there to physically say hi. This particular day was during the TWA American Airlines merger.
Yep.
So the airline execs were in the conference room, and that's where we would normally be. So they were in the conference room. They've been waiting like all day to see Kit. Kit walks in, sees us sitting at this little table over in the corner because it's the only place we could all get together. comes straight over to us, starts talking to these kids. Every one of them went around, what's your name, where are you from, what do you want to do in, after high school, all this stuff. Spent probably 20, 25 minutes with them. And then he's like, all right, well, I got to go. These guys have been waiting. So he takes off and goes. We finish our meeting. Later that night, I asked him about it because I'm 22, 23, just getting into politics, not understanding a lot. And I was like, hey, I got to know, you had these really important people sitting there waiting for you. And you took time to come over and talk to these kids who aren't even old enough to vote, which is my perspective at the time, right? And he just looks at me and he goes, the thing is, Ryan, he goes, those guys in that room, they're paid to be there. And if they don't see me today, they'll be back tomorrow and they'll still be getting paid. He goes, but those kids at that table may never get back to Washington, D.C. They may never get to talk to a U.S. Senator ever again. And maybe something I said to them will make a difference. And it blew my mind. And it honestly became the foundation for my entire outlook of serving in office.
And I think if there's one person that went on in service as you did for the state and the legislature that reminded me of that, it would have been you.
Well, I appreciate that. That's the kindest thing you could say.
It's an impressive legacy. Matt, give me a Kit Bond story.
Well, maybe not a story, but I was just thinking about as they were talking about this and about Kit. It's obviously been an emotional time over the last few months. And I do want to make sure, and I'd be remiss if we didn't have this show and thank Governor Kehoe for his kindness to the Bond family, to the Bond alumni during this time, and the leadership that he's shown and the friendship that he's shown. And I just want to make sure that we are really, really appreciative of the governor of that.
So there's a similar spirit from Senator Bond to Senator Blunt to Governor Kehoe.
Absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. But I will say in this time, I always used to take as the driver, I had the honor of taking Kit to Missouri home football games. Okay. And he could have been at a committee hearing. He could have been holding court in Washington. He could have been traveling to announce millions of dollars. And there's no place that he was more happy than in that parking lot and then going in and watching a game and watching those Missouri Tigers and then getting on the bus with the Mexico-Missouri crew going back to Mexico.
I love it. So give me a story.
There's so many. I'll have to go off color here. Let's see. Mary Beth Dobbs got a brand new car Kit wasn't accustomed to, and he thought the door handle was an ashtray. He filled that up with ashtray. Then one of our campaign staffers had a car, and of course she didn't use her ashtray because she didn't smoke. She put stuff in there. Well, Kit used it as an ashtray and lit her dash on fire. I mean, it goes on and on. I don't know. I know Kit loved the Tigers, as I do, and Matt does, but he did love the State Fair. And Farm Bureau building was always our headquarters, and we'd sneak in the back and have tomatoes with pepper on them and lemonade, and we just had a ball here. It took several of us to keep up with it. He was so intent on seeing everybody at the fair. We had to go eat pork chop, we had to have steak, we had to do this and that. And then the bud tent was pretty prominent in our itinerary as well. Unfortunately, I was staffing him, so I had to behave.
Well, I want to thank all of you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. Thank you. We'll be back on the road next week at the University of Missouri for our college tour that kicks off on This Week in Missouri Politics.
This Week in Missouri Politics is sponsored by the Missouri Automobile Dealers Association, Ameren, Spire, the United Electric Cooperative, and the Missouri Association of Career Fire Protection Districts.